addressing Nigeria's power problems. This Senate aware that Nigeria ranks amongst the lowest in electricity availability per capita in the world. This Senate worried that this fact retards growth and development, and to be counted among the emerging economies of the world, which will improve the standard of lives of its citizens. Nigeria must be able to produce and distribute electricity comparable to other emerging economies. This Senate aware that with a human population of about 200 million people and an annual growth rate of 2.6 per annum, Nigeria is the 7th most populous nation on earth, and going by our annual growth rate, the country will become the 3rd or 4th with most populous nation on earth within the next 20 years, behind China and India. The power generating or installed capacity of Nigeria in relation to its population and gross domestic product cannot place the country on any good pedestal to, on developmental terms, compete with other nations of its peerage. This Senate determined with the Federal Executive Council to find solutions to the power deficits the country faces by making analysis with other nations for illumination. Indonesia, with a population of 267 million people, has an installed power capacity of 60,000 megawatts and a generating capacity of 42,465 megawatts. Brazil, with a population of 211 million people, has an installed capacity of 167,000 megawatts and a generating capacity of 133 megawatts. 363 megawatts. Philippines, with a population of 107 million people, has an installed capacity of 20,055 megawatts and a generating capacity of 16,271 megawatts. Mexico, with a human population of 131 million people, has an installed capacity of 75,680 megawatts and a generating capacity of 53,653 megawatts. Egypt, with a population of 99 million people, has an installed capacity of 42,000 megawatts and a generating capacity of 31,241 megawatts. Turkey has a population of 81,916 million people and an installed capacity of 88,178 megawatts and a generating capacity of 57,292. South Africa has a population of 57 million people, an installed capacity of 51,309 megawatts, and a generating capacity of 34,978 megawatts. Morocco has a population of 36 million people, an installed capacity of 9,754 megawatts, and a generating capacity of 6,393 megawatts, while the USA, with a population of 330 million, has an installed capacity of 1,100,000 megawatts and a generating capacity of 717,710 megawatts. In comparison, Nigeria has a population of about 200 million people with an installed capacity of 12,500 megawatts and a generating capacity of 4,000 megawatts. What this means in terms of stimulation of economic activities and the impact on the lives of the people is not difficult to fathom. This Senate displayed that because of transmission constraints, including gas constraints and absence of a supervisory control and data acquisition system to monitor Nigeria's transmission infrastructure, which operates on 330 kVA and 132 kV networks, the maximum available power that can be delivered on this network is only 7,000 megawatts. Indeed, specifically, Nigeria's transmission infrastructure can only deliver about 5,000 megawatts, thereby limiting the amount of power the generating companies are allowed to put on the grid. To make matters worse, Nigeria's existing distribution infrastructure is decrepit, with no modern distribution technology and management systems. The effect is that the miserly available power that is put through our transmission networks gets more depleted to less than 4,000 megawatts in the distribution channels to reach the end user. This Senate projects that Nigeria can set a realizable target of generating the capacity of 100,000 megawatts to be achieved in the next 10 years with a national transmission wheeling capacity of the same amount of energy if it sets its mind to achieving it. This Senate convinced that this can be achieved if Nigeria makes use of its wonderful natural endowments to fuel its power needs. For instance, Nigeria can get energy from a mixed energy source, including natural gas, hydro, coal, wind, and the renewables, particularly solar energy. The Senate are aware that the various zones of the country are naturally positioned to take advantage of this energy mix and renewables. The northern part of this country, with vast expanse of land, can tap into large solar farms, while the southern parts of the country, with significant reserves of natural gas and coal, can generate power from the same. Both the north and south have large water bodies that can still be dammed for hydro. This Senate informed that Nigeria, although with more than 186 million cubic feet of proven gas reserves, natural gas will continue to be the main source of clean power generation, along with hydro. Renewable energy with improved technology and more advanced storage systems has the potential as the next big thing in power generation and should be seriously countenanced in Nigeria's overall power plans. This Senate convinced that Nigeria needs to be audacious in setting targets to meet the overall goals of the country in power management. And to do this, the government must incentivize and create a value chain alignment of the different sources and tapping on the different advantages of the geopolitical zones of the country to achieve the power goals of the country. For instance, the country should plan to have certain percentage allocation of power from different sources identified and aggressively allow and encourage private sector generators to take control of power generation in all these areas by creating the right environment for it to happen. One way of doing this is to acknowledge that processes of government business in Nigeria is too slow, and therefore incentives will be granted to private sector, including measures as partial risk guarantees to enable private investors, which unlike government that is tied to a cyclical funding arrangement of budget and revenue, can raise funds for projects tied to the economies of each particular project. The Senate persuaded that faster traction can be achieved in Nigeria's power management if government encourages generation models that are embedded at economic and industrial clusters, pivoting around regional grids that are semi-autonomous, but which are interconnected into one national grid. This Senate believes that the example of Egypt's mega project, which has commenced in March 2017 and completed in July 2018, which injected 14,400 megawatts into the Egyptian power grid, demonstrates what can be achieved when there is a good mix of quality players with commitment and political will like we have presently. This Senate convinced that Nigeria can improve on its transmission infrastructure by upscaling its network from the current 330 kV and 132 kV to 765 kV supergrid to enable big power plants to send their power through such grid over long distances. For purposes of development and construction, such grid can be split among several contractors who will compete on cost quality and competition and completion time, unlike what we have here now, where we have duplicated zones are given to different groups, instead of allowing more hands in doing that than only just one for the areas they have been given. This way, Nigeria will have a transmission system that is capable of wheeling over 100,000 megawatts efficiently. This Senate persuaded that beyond generation and transmission, distribution companies lack the financial and technical capacities, resulting in their inability to pay for the power the generation companies deliver onto the grid, with the resultant effect that generation companies not receiving their due on generation has stalled further expansion plans of their plans to achieve installed capacity. The government may have to review the performance of distribution companies since 2013, measuring same on critical performance indices like System Average Interruption Frequency Index, which measures the number of times electricity supply is interrupted in a day, and the System Average Interruption Duration Index, which measures how long on the average those interruptions last, and consider whether the country will better achieve its power goals by breaking up DISCO into smaller, more manageable distribution companies, as the current structure of distribution is unwieldy, covering several states and vast geographical terrain, which offer little incentives to investors. This Senate, mindful that at the time of power sector privatization in 2013, the objective in privatizing the power distribution assets of Nigeria was not capital not to achieve highest financial base. Rather, its goal was to get capable companies that can achieve the lowest average technical, commercial, and collection losses, etc. and C, within the 5 years to invest in and take over management of distribution companies. This Senate further minded that during the bidding for the distribution assets, bidders needed to have two capacities. A, financial capacity, adequate funds to invest in modernizing and reinforcing the infrastructure in order to reduce losses, as well as independent funds that they will use to purchase the assets. B, technical capacity. This can be achieved by partnering with reputable international power distribution companies. And this Senate reminded that unfortunately, neither of the above capacities were used by governments when they selected final bidders and handed over the distribution assets. Apparently, rather than bring in adequate funds through their partners, etc., the buyers of the distribution assets simply borrowed money from the Nigerian commercial banks and provided them to the Board of Borrow for Public Enterprises as their equity for the purchase of the assets. Hence, their inability to make the much needed investment to reduce the average technical, commercial, and collection losses. As agreed, and given time has expired, necessitating a review which requires strong political will from Mr. President Buhari. And this Senate accordingly resolves, one, to direct the Committee on Power on the power problems of generation, transmission, and distribution in Nigeria to investigate the various issues raised in this motion and report back within.
Have you amended that prayer?
Yes, well, I've done that.
Okay, because mine is reading set up another committee.
No, this motion came when we didn't have committee.
Okay, all right.
So the committee is already in place. Two, urge the federal government to target the achievement of 100,000 megawatts of installed capacity for the country to match the size of Nigeria's economy and improve its development status. Three, urge the federal government to devise power generation models that are embedded at economic and industrial clusters, hinging around regional grids that are semi-autonomous but interconnected to the national grid. Four, urge the federal government to upgrade the transmission infrastructure of Nigeria's power grid for a more efficient transmission of power. And finally, urge the federal government to break up Nigeria's power distribution companies into smaller, more manageable distribution companies for optimal performance and competition. I so move.